Hello, welcome to another video. There was a video before this one and there's gonna be another one after it. So today I just want to say a few words about this Gen Z stare that we've all been hearing about. At least I've been hearing about it. It's a very interesting phenomenon to me for a couple of reasons. So basically, if you don't know, the Gen Z stare is like when a service worker that is Gen Z is at their job, right? They're at their cashier or they're making food or something, and a customer tries to talk to them and they just sort of stare at the customer instead of responding. You know, when a customer walks in, instead of greeting them, they just sort of stare or they don't respond. And it comes across to a lot of people as kind of antisocial or kind of like they're not doing their jobs right and that kind of thing. And I've seen some takes about this online. Various people saying various different things about what the Gen Z stare is and like why they're doing it and whether or not it's rude and all of this stuff. And well, here's my take on it. It really seems like Gen Z is doing what previous generations, particularly millennials, wanted to do when they were in those service jobs, right? It seems like they're just sort of like tired and they sort of know that they're not getting paid enough to emotionally put out for 40 hours a week, right? They know they're not getting paid enough for that, and so they're just sort of not gonna try as hard to please people and to be the perfect employee. And I think that's a really healthy choice, to be honest. I think that's a good decision, and I think Gen Z is going to be healthier in the future for making that decision. You know, Gen Z has grown up in this world where the economy sucks, the politics sucks. We had COVID while they were like in high school, which, you know, people say, oh, it's only a 2 or 3 year period of time, it shouldn't be that impactful. But when you're a teenager, 2 or 3 years is a long time. And especially when you're in high school, those are some very formative years where people are really learning, you know, how to interact with other people. And I don't think Gen Z doesn't know how to socialize. I don't think Gen Z is like lacking social skills. I think it's very natural and normal for humans to socialize. I think we all have social skills inherent to us. Even people that like can't speak will try to communicate with people around them. Even people that, you know, can't socialize in the typical ways, like autistic people, they try to socialize in their own ways, right? And so everybody, I think, has this inherent drive and desire and ability to socialize. It's just that Gen Z is packaging that up and keeping that safe within themselves and saving their energy for when it's actually useful, right? They know where their efforts are being rewarded and where their efforts aren't being rewarded. And so if they're not being rewarded at work, you know, like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if the customers thought they were a little rude or distant or cold or whatever, they still get paid the same amount regardless of what they put out. And at this point, they're not going to lose their jobs for it either, because, you know, everybody's doing it. And if you want to hire Gen Zs, you're going to have to deal with this Gen Z stare among your employees. So here's the thing. A lot of millennials I've seen in particular, I've been really upset by this. And I think, in all honesty, I think they're just jealous. I think they're legitimately just jealous. Now, I'm not really a millennial or a Gen Z. I'm kind of both. I'm right in the middle. I was born in 97. And so I'm like a late millennial or a young millennial and like an elder Gen Z at the same time. So I'm kind of in between them. And I grew up basically being told that I was a millennial. And then when Gen Z started entering high school and everything, I was more often told that I'm Gen Z. And, you know, I've been watching their career with great interest, essentially. I've just been watching them grow up and with intrigue and sort of seeing how they're going to handle the world as it is. And I think Gen Z is realizing things that I was trying to tell my millennial peers that they just weren't listening to, right? Because I had service industry jobs. You can check out my last video where I talk about different jobs I've had. To know all the jobs I've had. I've been a cashier, I've been, you know, a service worker, various types. And, you know, I would try to tell my coworkers back then, especially when I worked at Sheetz for 2 years, I would try to, you know, tell my coworkers, we aren't getting paid enough to put in all of this energy, right? Like my roommate, who was also my coworker, he was just freakishly obsessed with doing a good job. And he was actually younger than me. He was actually a Gen Z, but this was before Gen Zs were really like in the media and really like a big talking point in the world. So he had like just graduated high school. He was like in his early 20s basically, and I was in my mid 20s. And so like, but he was like freakishly obsessed with doing a good job and being a good employee, and like I don't know, he got some kind of satisfaction out of that, which is fine, I guess. But I tried to tell him repeatedly, like, are you really getting paid enough for all of this energy you're putting into this job, right? Do you feel like you're getting paid enough for the effort? And he just didn't really have a good answer for that. He was like, you know, but you got to get paid one way or another, and at least I have a job and all of this. This was his second job, and I kept telling him, like, you know, in the future, you're probably going to be really exhausted by this. You're probably going to be burned out. And I know because I've been through that, right? I used to put in 110% at every job, and all I got was tired. That's all I got for my efforts was exhaustion and burnout. And like, I'm concerned that you're putting in all of this energy and you're not going to get rewarded for it, and it's just going to hurt you in the future. And he wouldn't listen to that, and all of my millennial coworkers wouldn't listen to that. My millennial peers on the internet, they wouldn't listen to that. Some of them did. Some of them kind of understood what I was talking about, but the general sentiment was, well, you got to make money, so we got to go to our jobs, and if we don't do a good job, we'll get fired. And that's not necessarily true, because a lot of these Gen Zs are doing this Gen Z stare and not getting fired for it. So, I mean, I'm sure some people are getting let go because, like, oh, you need to smile at the customers more or whatever. But I haven't heard much about it happening, like, en masse. Obviously, everybody's complaining about Gen Z's work ethic. But I haven't heard anybody, like, getting fired explicitly for that reason. So I think, you know, millennials in general, not all of them, but most millennials that had this kind of service worker job put in a lot of effort with the hopes, they still had this optimism from the 2000s and the 2010s, that like if they put in the effort, they could maybe achieve a small smidgen of the American dream, right? They still sort of believe in that. And when they were working these jobs, they put in all of this effort and they were never rewarded for it. And so I think they're genuinely like jealous, at the very least, maybe even envious. Because what I've been hearing from millennials that have sort of accepted this, have sort of, you know, are sort of on the side of Gen Z when it comes to this, what I've heard them say is that, man, I wish I had done that. I wish I had had the guts to, you know, just stare at stupid customers that ask me stupid questions, or just not put that much effort into my job. And I think this is a natural consequence also of like the quiet quitting phenomenon, where people just stop putting in so much effort. You know, that's kind of all this is. It's just the sort of natural consequence. It's the natural end point of that phenomenon, where people are saving their energy because they're not getting paid enough to put in all of this effort at work. And there's some millennials out there that are saying, you know, I wish I had done that. I'm kind of jealous. And I think the ones that are envious, the ones that, you know, are not only jealous, but they also wish that Gen Z has to suffer as much as they did, right? Those people are saying things like, oh, they're so rude, and oh, you know, back when I was working this job, I always smiled even though I was having a hard time, even though I wasn't getting paid enough, and, you know, so you should too. And I've actually interacted with a millennial like this. This was my coworker roommate's sister, and she basically was like complaining about my work ethic, even though she didn't work with me or anything. But she got wind that I was only working part-time, specifically so I could work less hours, and I was like complaining about that, I think. And she came up and she started complaining about, you know, she started ranting about, you know, I was a cashier for a long time. I worked at a pharmacy. I worked at all these different places, and I built myself up from the ground up, and, you know, that's how you succeed in life. And I never complained about it. It's like, okay, well, she was addicted to pills the whole time that she was working those jobs. You know, the whole time she was in her 20s, she was addicted to pills, probably the only thing getting her through the exhaustive effort that she was putting in. And like, she got married. She got married and found a breadwinner. She didn't like move up in life or anything. She just got married, and then she got divorced. And now, you know, at that point in time when we were having this conversation, she hated her life. She just straight up hated her life, and I could tell. And she was deluding herself into thinking she had succeeded, she was successful, and therefore I needed to do exactly what she did to be successful. And I think that she saw me sort of, putting in less energy, right? Having a part-time job and complaining about my job and being like, they don't pay us enough for this and all of that. And she saw me sort of being convicted in that and being content in general with my life, despite not being successful, despite not having any upward prospects, and she was upset because I wasn't acting the way that she acted when she was my age. And so I think this is how millennials are sort of reacting to the Gen Z stare, is they're jealous, and they're also, some of them are envious. They want Gen Z to do exactly what they did, even though they know it's not gonna help Gen Z at all. And I think they're just upset that Gen Z is like emotionally intelligent enough to know where their efforts are rewarded and to know when they should save their energy and when they should actually put out. And at this point, I don't think most Gen Z see any real reason to put out a lot of, disciplined effort into really anything because of the world that we live in right now. These kids are tired. They're exhausted. And honestly, I think it's more reasonable to be concerned about their health first and foremost. If you walk into a store and you see the cashier standing there like, wouldn't you be more concerned about, like, is that person okay? Like, are you okay, bro? Instead of being like, why didn't you greet me? Why didn't you say hello when I walked in the door? Like, what kind of person are you that walks in and sees somebody that's clearly in distress and you're just like, how rude you are? Because you did the strong thing, the brave thing, and you hid your stress from the world all your life, so other people should too, and it makes you uncomfortable to see someone that's exhausted and tired and that's not putting in 110% effort for you. And a lot of people will say, it's not asking much for a cashier to just greet people as they walk in the door. It's not asking much. But imagine if you had to do that hundreds of times a day for 40 hours a week, 5 days a week. It's not asking much for somebody to greet people, 2 or 3 times a day. That's pretty normal. It's probably pretty average. It's probably pretty natural for us. Ah! My duck. But hundreds of times a day, that will get exhausting. That will get tiring, and you will end up tired at the end of the day. And if you've worked a service job, you should know that. You should know how exhausting it is. And if it wasn't exhausting for you, good job. What drug were you on? Right? Because you must have been on something to get through that. Either you were taking a drug or you were praying to God or something. You had something that got you through it. And Gen Z is being shamed out of all of their main coping mechanisms. Plus, things like therapy and psychiatric medications aren't really doing their job right now. Because of the world we live in, those things are just sort of band-aids on a massive gaping wound that is Gen Z's burnout. And so that's not working. Gen Z is fucking tired, okay? Like, they're tired, and they're not gonna put in any more effort than they need to for anything. And I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, really, employers have got to learn that you can't just drain our life force out of us and give us, $14 an hour for it. That's not gonna work anymore. We're either going to, you're either gonna pay us more, or we're not gonna let you take our life force. We're just gonna save it for ourselves. We're not gonna give it to the customers. We're not gonna give it to the company. We're not gonna give it to our employer. We're not gonna give it to our coworkers, right? And I haven't had a job in quite a while. This Gen Z stare has become a thing since like after I quit my last job. But ultimately, this might be the reason that I rejoin the workforce. If this becomes a normal thing, or if people start getting paid more to prevent this from happening, then maybe I would actually be able to find a job that I can do that will give me a living wage. If this becomes normalized, maybe employers will actually learn that you need to pay your employees a living wage, or they will act dead on their shifts, okay? Because if you don't have enough money to live, if you don't have enough money to be happy and content, to entertain yourself and to stay healthy, if you don't have enough free time for hobbies and creativity and all this other stuff, then you're just gonna spiritually die. And that's how people will act. They're not gonna hide it anymore. And genuinely, I'm very proud of these kids. I'm proud of these Gen Zs. I mean, a lot of them aren't even kids anymore. I mean, I'm 28 and I'm like one of the oldest Gen Zs, right? So they're in their mid to late 20s now at this point. A lot of them are, in their early 20s. But that's the generation. They're adults now. They're young adults, but they're adults now, and they know what they're doing. I think they've seen people get into student loan debt. Probably throughout high school, they were talking amongst themselves about, like, I'm not going to college. This shit's expensive. I don't want to be in debt for the rest of my life. But if I have to have, like, a job at McDonald's flipping burgers, then I'm not going to put that much effort into it because they're not going to pay me enough. So, what do I do? This is the life that these people are facing. And so, and you expect them to be all smiles and chipper and greet you when you come in the door like you're the king of the world or something. Like, no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I'm very proud of these kids. Like I said, I think they're making a healthy decision and they're going to be healthier in the future for it. And I wish I had done more, quiet quitting, right? I wish I had done that a little more. I did put in a lot of effort in my jobs and I didn't get anything for it. I got fired oftentimes, right? You can watch my previous video on all the jobs I've had to get sort of the breakdown on that. But there was that job that I had where I did a great job. I finished all my work early. I did extra work for them, and they still didn't hire me. They still didn't hire me permanently. It was a temp job. And so I got essentially fired from that job for no other reason than I didn't want to go on my lunch break with my coworkers. I would rather take my lunch break alone. It's a great worker. I put in 110% effort, got nothing for it. And that money is gone now. It was gone within a couple weeks. The money that I made from that job. So, what's the point? What's the point? And the same reason that Gen Z is doing this Gen Z stare is the same reason that I refuse to be employed again. These ducks these days are so lazy, they don't even want to stand up and pose for a video anymore. Look at this, you can't stay on your feet, you lazy little bum. So anyway, that's pretty much my thoughts about it. I think millennials are just jealous, maybe even envious. The people that have sort of accepted that this is happening and are sort of proud of Gen Z, they're open about their jealousy, saying, I wish I had done this more when I was their age. And I really, really hope that this makes some kind of change, or at the very least that Gen Z can save their energy, right? That they can accomplish what they're trying to accomplish with this, which is just saving their energy. They just disassociate into their minds. I did this a lot when I was at work too, just disassociating, just, daydreaming the whole day away. It's a really awful way to live. And I think, not putting in that 110% effort or even 50% effort into, making the customers happy with the smiles and the greetings and the social aspect of it. As long as they're making the food right, as long as they're, not messing up the payment, right? Not charging you too much or whatever. As long as they're keeping the place clean, what's the problem, right? That's their job, really. Why has this social aspect ever been a part of the job? I think Gen Z is sort of realizing that this is the easiest way to save their energy and not actually get fired, because they are doing their jobs. But, why is this customer service part of it so important? And it's also the most exhausting part of the job. Everything else is just a physical thing, but the social aspect is a mental task. And, if you want to find out what it's like to greet every single person that walks through the door and have a conversation, have small talk back to back to back to back to back for 40 hours a week, I don't know, maybe do Sudoku puzzles 8 hours a day, just one after the other, right? Or like a crossword or something, or just play chess for hours and hours a day. See how mentally exhausting that is. And you might understand how mentally exhausting it is to socialize with people on this surface level all day, every day, 40 hours a week. So anyway, That's how I feel about it. Gen Z, good job. I really wish millennials had taken to this a little earlier. It's good to see that people are realizing what I've been saying for a long time, and I hope that you guys are going to be okay. You know, prioritize your health, your mental health above everything else. And if you're not getting paid enough, you know, why bother? Truly, why bother? If you are Gen Z, or even if you're someone else and you're working a service industry job and you think, you know, this resonates with you, you're kind of tired, maybe you should adopt the Gen Z stare. Next time a customer says something stupid to you, just look at them. All right, like the video if you liked it, sub to the channel if you want to see more of this, and check out my last video about jobs I've had as well if you're interested in more context about that. And thank you so much for watching, and have a peaceful day.